this is a first. Now, usually, the stores that I shop at for these pretty old games won't price anything below $1. That's as low as they will possibly go. However, today, I bring you a game that I purchased for 90 cents. And I know what you're thinking, and no, it's not a sports title. So, the game that was thought of so little that I only paid 90 cents for it is... Mega Man X? No, really, I got Mega Man X from a local thrift store for 90 cents. See, some larger thrift stores price their goods, in particular what get classified as toys, based on their ability to work by themselves. Things like old video games, namely cartridge titles, tend to be viewed as not only horribly outdated, but little more than paperweights by themselves, and as such can be found for rather low prices from thrift stores that don't know any better. In short, thrift stores can be really, really stupid, but in a way that benefits you. So, the next time your mom drags you to one while looking for cheap clothes or furniture, go to the horribly unorganized electronics section. You may be surprised what you find.
And if you don't know, now you know, nigga.
And with that out of the way, there's the matter of a poll that I put up a long time ago to see what game would be next on $5 Gaming. And I have the results right here, and it looks like... yeah. Game C was the winner, which means it's time for a cheap scare.
Was that scary? Did I scare you?
So what's French and developed the game we're looking at today? Nope! Trick question. Ubisoft only published this game. Cold Fear was actually developed by Darkworks. Darkworks might be more well known for their contributions to gaming technology than their games, as they helped create the Triovis for games technology, a 3D conversion software development kit used in games like Gears of War 3 and Batman Arkham Asylum. As for video games, they had a total of about 7 projects since 1998, including 1906 and Antarctic Odyssey, and 2 other cancelled titles in Black Death and USS Antarctica, which as far as I can tell is basically 1906 and Antarctic Odyssey for the Xbox. There are rumors that this project was the eventual basis for Cold Fear, but that hasn't been confirmed. In terms of games released to the public though, I can count them on one hand. The last game they contributed to before closing down was I Am Alive, and their first title was Alone in the Dark: The New Nightmare, a game which somehow managed to bore me in spite of my liking Edward Carnby the character, a promising beginning, and the presence of a triple-barreled shotgun.
Aline! Aline!
And the sound design didn't help at times either. Nothing quite kills the suspense quite like a sudden Getting back to the matter at hand, the trailer for Cold Fear shows a Russian whaling vessel in the Arctic Ocean. What's your fetish with cold places, Darkworks?
I can no longer survive out of a sub-zero environment.
Oh my god, Darkworks with Mr. Freeze all along. This won't become an annoying running gag I force into the video at all. Doing it and doing it and doing it well. Doing it and doing it and doing it well. I represent the unfunny side of gamers.
Alpha Team is flying around the forest zone situated in northwest Raccoon City.
An Alpha Team is sent to investigate the ship, and they only last about 50 seconds before the entire squad gets torn to pieces.
Something's out there.
Come in. Come in. Damn it, Hernandez. Talk to me.
Being dead doesn't excuse you from doing your job. God damn it! CIA agent Bennett, after failing to reach his team, calls for any nearby government vessels to investigate the whaling ship, and Tom Hansen answers the call, a member of the United States Coast Guard and head of the USS Ravenswood, whose crew you will not see or hear from beyond this shot or this conversation from the first playable moments of the game.
Party, this is the Ravenswood. The seas are too rough. We're gonna have to head back. You're on your own, people. You heard the man. Keep it tight. Did you hear that? Hear what? Open fire! Open fire! Holy shit! Ah! I'm falling back!
Actually, SCR, I too played this game, and you do find one of your crew members later on, dead on a toilet with an access code, but you do find him nevertheless.
Oh my god. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe this is happening, but it's Tom Hansen. Tom Hansen, the protagonist of Cold Fear, is here to help me with this video.
Wait, what? Dude, I'm not playing as a character or anything. It's just me, Long Guy Gamer. We've been friends for over 3 years. You gave me Illblade and I reviewed it. We've been through several conventions together. We did a collaborative review on Muramasa.
Oh, nice try, Tom, but you can't fool me. I mean, look at this picture of you from the game, and now look at you. 100% likeness. Either you're Tom Hansen, or you're Tom Hansen's twin brother who also happens to be named Tom Hansen. There's no other possibilities.
Please tell me you aren't serious.
Are you still in the US Coast Guard, by the way?
I'll just let you continue on with the review.
And so the game begins not by pitting you against its rough equivalent of zombies, but by forcing you to navigate around the deck during a massive storm. And being able to compensate for the environment in Cold Fear plays a key role in being able to progress through certain parts of the game. On the ship, anything that isn't tied down, except barrels for some reason, will swing around and hit you if you're not careful. Their damage typically is minimal at best on normal difficulty, which is good because sometimes items that barely swing around will still damage you if you so much as brush against them. In addition to causing the ship and things on it to move, the storm also creates waves in certain areas that can slam you or enemies into walls, and can even wash you overboard or tip the ship so much that you fall overboard in some areas. Obviously, this is a non-factor anytime you're indoors, but even then you'll still have your aim and your character affected by the rocking of the ship. It takes some getting used to when trying for headshots, but I never found it to be a significant drawback, and if anything, it added to the experience. I was also somewhat surprised by the small details related to this, like Tom shielding himself from the rain or swaying back and forth on the ship. The latter, however, ended up looking kind of ridiculous at points, and even led to him leaning through walls in certain areas, so it's hit or miss in terms of effectiveness.
Not that there's anything wrong with violating reality now and then. Delicious perversion of the laws of space and time.
If there's one thing I was really worried about going into Cold Fear, it was the design of the ship. I don't know how many of you have ever been on board ships like this before, but in terms of interior design, they can pretty much be summed up in one word.
Boring.
I thought for sure I'd end up getting lost repeatedly in the bowels of the ship, especially with the lack of a map function. Fortunately, the chaos caused by an in-progress outbreak on the ship has helped vary the rooms and halls and made each somewhat unique in their own way, to the point that I never got lost going from various rooms on one end of the ship to the other. The much larger oil rig I got lost on a couple of times, but not the ship. It also helps that the in-game menu, the closest thing Cold Fear has to an inventory system, tells you the current objective, along with where to go to complete it, and what any key items you've picked up are used for, and where to use them. As well as the fact that Tom Hansen can read and speak some Russian.
Здравствуйте. Speak English.
As such, he can tell what the nameplates on all the doors and walls say. This along with Tom flat out telling you when you're going the wrong way.
This looks like the wrong way. This looks like the wrong way.
Or sometimes when you're going the right way.
The radio room must be up these stairs. Haven't tried that door yet.
Make it so you have little excuse for not knowing where to go or what to do. It's not so much dumbing down the experience as it is Tom knowing what he's doing.
Now that I think about it, Tom talks to himself a lot in this game. And he sounds about the way you would expect a French guy doing a flat American accent would.
Nothing on the frozen stiff except the keys to his quarters. The damn thing's stuck. Am I glad to see you again? Gotta find a handle to stick back on this door. The damn thing's stuck.
Could you imagine someone in their day-to-day life doing this?
Got it!
The damn thing's stuck.
He's done for!
Let's get out of here!
Just from the first few clips of the game, you've probably noticed something about the camera. There are 2 different cameras in this game which are controlled by whether or not you have your weapon ready. There's a third-person camera that functions much like the camera in the Fatal Frame or Silent Hill games, and an over-the-shoulder camera for when Tom's weapon is aimed. And yes, you can aim and move, and even fire or melee while moving at the same time. However, I wound up using the over-the-shoulder view almost all the time for 2 reasons. One, when moving around inside anything in this game, some of the camera angles don't lend themselves well to the tight, narrow, winding spaces that make up most areas. That, and it's easier to see if there's something in front of you by just keeping your weapon ready all the time. The second reason is that a lot of this game is really, really dark. The only light source you have for about half of the game is the light on Tom's pistol, so even if it's out of ammo, you'll likely find yourself using it as a flashlight. It can be annoying at times, but I felt it was a decent way to balance out the weapons issue. Over the course of the game, Tom picks up an AK, shotgun, grenade launcher, flamethrower.
Mac wants the flamethrower! Mac wants the...
No! Bad overused joke. Bad overused joke. No. No.
And an MP5, the only other gun with a light which is found well over halfway through the game. As such, most of the game's combat involves a trade-off between firepower and being able to see. It isn't much of one though, since the control scheme has hot buttons for 4 of the stronger weapons. There's also a spear gun that's loaded with certain proteins which attract everything but living humans, and can serve as a way to distract enemies or cluster them into one area. Sounds useful, but unless you're on the harder difficulties, you might not end up ever needing to use it. One annoying thing about weapons is that you can't pick up ammo for other guns until you've already found them. Given Cold Fear's lack of a limited inventory like in most survival horror games, this seemed like an unusual design choice given Tom's pants of infinite holding. It's nothing to get too worked up about though, because the weapons are typically found shortly after the ammo starts showing up, and you almost always double back through wherever the ammo was anyway. It's still irritating, but not a huge obstacle to playing or enjoying the game.
Unlike certain control options.
I discovered some controls by experimenting on my own, as there are next to no explanations for controls during the course of the game, though things like searching dead bodies for ammo and health packs and other basic game mechanics are explained in various documents. I actually got stuck on a bridge because there were laser trip mines set up to block my path, but I had gotten to that point without realizing that Tom can duck by clicking the left analog stick. There simply wasn't anything leading up to this point, about 2/3 through the game, where ducking was ever explained or necessary to advance. I also didn't discover until much later that there's an option to have your weapon up and walk around from the normal external camera view. Hey, wait a minute! Aside from that, I had no problem with the controls. Aside from sometimes punching things I tried to interact with because they were assigned to the same button. Something I did have a problem with was the save mechanic. This is one of the few things that I outright hated about this game. Instead of having, for example, save points stationed in certain areas, a save menu pops up once you've progressed to certain points of the game, and once you've decided whether to save or not, you can't trigger the menu again. They show up somewhat often, about every 20 or 30 minutes depending on your playstyle and difficulty, but that doesn't make it any less inconvenient, or any less of a dead giveaway that something is going to happen on the other side of the door.
And that is a little fucking obnoxious.
What if I have shit to do in between the 2 saves? I mean, couldn't there be, like, I don't know, just for an example, a room I could duck into so I could save in there? Why couldn't I have something a little more flexible like that?
I don't know, maybe you have a short-term memory? Get it? Save point? Memory? Memory card?
You make one more bad joke like that, Tom, and I'll run you into the laser trip mines on purpose.
Oh, come on! I'm not Tom Hansen! What, just because I'm blonde you automatically think I'm the main character? And what would running into the laser mines accomplish?
Don't you get it, man? You die in the game! You die for real.
Did you seriously just quote that dumb video game horror movie?
That was a movie?
In spite of that, I felt like Cold Fear did a decent job of creating a solid atmosphere. It doesn't rely exclusively on feelings of unease, or on throwing out jump scares every 2 minutes. There's a mix of both that occur at varying points in the game, and some moments that are a bit of a cross between the two. Though I felt that the overdramatic music that played on the deck of the ship, regardless of what was going on, was way too much. Getting back to what the game is about, Tom eventually finds out that he's boarded the Russian ship as its men, consisting almost entirely of mercenaries, are being attacked and taken over by parasitic creatures called exocells. They're creatures capable of entering a body, alive or dead, and extending a tentacle up the spine and into the brain to control it, creating the equivalent of a zombie, with the only thing that can stop them being to destroy the brain. At least that's how it's supposed to work, but there are times where you'll find some weakened but still living infectees with nearly all of their head and brain missing.
Very good. A detective to the last.
They almost always attack with a meat cleaver or some other melee weapon, although there are instances where the exocell infectees do use guns, either against Tom or any still living Russian mercenaries. Speaking of, there are a number of instances where you see the Russians fighting off exocell victims, and regardless of who wins these encounters, either the Russians or the exocells inevitably come after you. You'd think the Russian mercenaries wouldn't give a shit about some American guy on their ship when there are living corpses actively trying to butcher them.
Maybe they're just really sick of how Americans ran those "in Soviet Russia" jokes into the ground.
Either way, this does help vary the combat and not make you feel like you're following the same formula over and over. This is especially true when the game starts throwing multiple exocells and exocell husks at you at the same time, or brings in an enemy that can turn invisible, and another that can knock out the lights by roaring, forcing you to either stick to guns with lights attached to them, or try to follow their glowing eyes with a stronger weapon. It can be a little unnerving until you figure out that the latter can be stun-locked by shotgun blasts. Before that, though, you follow the lead of a soon-to-be deceased general and meet a Russian girl named Anna.
Where is Dmitri?
Yusupov's dead.
Good. The bastard deserved it.
So can you tell me what the hell is going on here? He said you had some answers.
He lied.
She's not the most hospitable person at first. Beyond this point, the game's difficulty curve gradually increases, and is supposed to force the player to do things like keep enemies incapacitated, or at a distance using environmental traps. There are a number of things that can be shot or otherwise triggered, which will help kill enemies. Among these things are barrels of fuel, fire extinguishers, electrified water, and even fuse boxes, which more so exist to open electronically locked doors.
It's unlocked. It's unlocked.
I say supposed to because it kind of falls flat for a couple of reasons. For one thing, the way some of these objects are explained is beyond ludicrous. Take the fuel valves, for example. A file you get about them mentions that guys were using them as target practice. Target practice! Sure, use the things that spew jets of fire and have gallons of highly flammable liquid behind them for target practice! Secondly, I didn't want to use most of these, because the ones that show up the most, the barrels and the valves, set the enemy on fire. In theory that's good because it saves bullets and kills any exocells in the body as well, but it also prevents you from being able to loot anything from the body. I got roughly a third of my ammo and even a few health items from looting bodies, which is no small feat considering they tend to disappear after about 8 seconds. And third, I was very rarely low on health or ammo for most weapons, except the pistol because I'd use it constantly for the light attached to it. Reason being, there are a couple of sick bays you can visit which are loaded with health packs. I'm not even sure if you can run out of these, because I also had the health packs I'd find in the field to fall back on, which I would intentionally leave if my health was more than 3/4 full, as the packs recover roughly half of Tom's health bar.
Actually, medkits are limited in medical rooms, as I managed to use up almost all of them in the boat's medical room, so you can't exactly rely on them for infinite use.
Okay. My bad, man. My bad. I mean, I knew I should have just asked the guy who was there to take advantage of this in the first place.
What do you want from me, SCR? Do I just play along with this, or do you truly think I am Tom Hansen? I can't tell if you're being serious or if you're just trolling me.
Do you still keep in touch with that Russian chick?
There are also armories in the game, which will max out the ammo for every weapon you have. This is particularly exploitable when Anna and Tom get off the ship after crashing into the oil rig the exocells initially came from. The one on the ship is pretty bad too, but eventually some of the more explosive weapon shells stored there get wet, they degrade over the course of the game, and
Explode!
There were still about a dozen times that I died playing through on normal difficulty, but about 8 of those were on the final boss, and a couple of them were from just not paying attention to how close to an unprotected ledge I was.
He should have been more careful.
Oh well, at least I wasn't getting killed by any bullshit glitches or wildly unbalanced gameplay. There are some slip-ups here and there in the programming, but nothing game-breaking. There was that one time I killed an enemy on a stairwell and their legs couldn't decide whether they were on flat ground or the steps. And I did come across a couple of times where bodies would levitate away from walls to avoid clipping through them. But other than that and the leaning through a wall thing, I never ran into any glitches or programming gaps along the way.
Yeah, except when I played it.
What the hell are you talking about? I never saw anything go wrong when... Okay. By the way, I've been meaning to ask, but sorry if this is a stupid question, by the way, but what's it like to play as yourself in a video game?
You see this desk and all the games and shit I have? Would Tom Hansen really have all this?
Well, I mean, I didn't want to intrude on your personal life, Tom. I mean, I was just...
Just go on.
As for the story of Cold Fear, there are some interesting dynamics involving Agent Bennett's agenda, Anna's relationship with her dad, who works on the oil rig that bred the exocells, but most of them are almost entirely laid out in files you may not read, and there are some plot lines that are flat out dropped and never explained. For one, Tom at one point does get an exocell inside of him, and chooses to give the one antidote to Anna, who is also infected.
So this is it, Tom. 2 patients, 1 cure.
This is never mentioned again. That gaping plot hole is made even worse by the ending, which... For what little good the game did stringing together a narrative through the documents found around the ship and the oil rig, the ending is just abysmal, failing to resolve even some of the most basic plot points. I won't give away what it is or what it doesn't address, but after seeing it, I couldn't help but think,
That's it? Not even a thank you?
Thank yourself.
and after the abrupt ending, it just cuts to the credits and plays a Marilyn Manson song. There was an interview with ldumusic.com in which a Darkworks sound designer went on about how they specifically included this song, Use Your Fist and Not Your Mouth, because it fit the game and was, quote, like a tagline for players to complete the game.
First off,
How fucking dumb is that?
like gamers in 2005 really need to be told, shoot the bad things to make the good things happen. And second off, I played through the entire game. And you know when I heard this music? I only heard it during the demo at the start menu and the credits at the end. Great use of that licensed music, Darkworks. Worth every goddamn penny. Play it again.
How fucking dumb is that?
There are some extras you can get for progressing through and beating the game, though. And by extras, I mean you unlock an extra difficulty, as well as concept art, followed by concept art, and concept art, but not before you get to concept art, some concept art, and finally concept arting the last concept art to get more concept art. And just in case you were trying to look at these before they were unlocked, you'll get a message saying what you have to do to gain access to them, spoiling key parts of the game before you've even started playing it.
Spoiler alert!
And since I've been avoiding it the entire video to this point, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room for this game. That being, it's considered a ripoff of Resident Evil 4. I'd be lying if I told you they were two completely different games, as both of them have a blonde protagonist involved with the US government, both involve taking orders to follow a mission from a government agent, both deal with a parasitic lifeform taking over people's bodies, and both have parts where you have to protect the female lead. Though Cold Fear only does this twice in roughly 3-minute chunks in the whole game, and as such isn't nearly as annoying. Even some abnormally specific things are the same, such as having the plot element of the male and female lead both getting infected, having to kill a supporting antagonist to use his eye to unlock a door. And how about a jump scare involving a body coming out of a locker in the mess hall? Hey, why not? I'm not going to sit here and say they weren't looking over Capcom's shoulder when RE4 was being developed, but I can't say they were either. According to some interviews I found with the developers, Cold Fear's development cycle began in early 2003. Resident Evil 4 was in development and showing gameplay demos at the time, but said demos were of the Hookman version of the game shown at E3 2003. You can argue the similarities between that and Cold Fear on your own time. My point is, with Cold Fear having a 2-year window leading to its release a mere 2 months after Resident Evil 4, there wouldn't be enough time to carbon copy most of the elements of RE4, and indeed they didn't. Besides, I'd say it reminds me more of a different title from the same series, Resident Evil Dead Aim. Dead Aim starts off on a ship, like Cold Fear, has a main antagonist who's a former researcher gone rogue like Cold Fear, has a similar third-person follow cam employed by Cold Fear, allows for moving while aiming like Cold Fear, has a non-American and at first uncooperative female lead like Cold Fear, and has some blonde wise-ass guy in the lead role.
Party guests seem to arrive.
Although I will give it this, Cold Fear's story, way better than Dead Aim's.
Maybe, but personally I would compare this game more to the survival horror Dreamcast game Carrier, which also takes place on a boat and you play as a blonde male protagonist too, which is also considered a Resident Evil clone. But on the other hand, you could say Dead Space drew inspiration from Cold Fear. Not that I'm sure if Visceral Games actually drew inspiration, it's just that I find it pretty similar and consider it a precursor of sorts to Dead Space.
Oh, wow, I never even thought about Carrier. Thanks for that insightful comparison, Tom.
You know, fine! I am Tom Hansen! The damn thing's stuck! I gotta go find the code! Where's my shoehorn Russian love interest? I need to go bang her!
Looking back at Cold Fear, I can't ignore that some parts of it seem to be, let's call it, heavily inspired by other titles in the genre. However, I will say this. Cold Fear did something that Resident Evil 5 never did to me, and that is legitimately scare me a little. I've played so many survival horror titles that I've become pretty jaded to most of them, but the first time I went through a door near the bottom of the ship and found this, I'll admit, it got me a little. And it did so without having shit flash in front of the screen, or a loud crash, or a musical sting. That's not scary, that's startling. Cold Fear does do this now and then, but it doesn't become overwhelming or predictable. Even going into places I'd already explored, I couldn't be at ease, because as you progress, enemies will find their way back into those little areas. Small things like that make the game and the environment it creates more tense and dynamic. So I'd say if you're looking for a cheap survival horror title mixed with action elements, and you see this for sale for $5, give it a shot. In spite of its stupid and unoriginal title, give it a shot.
And I just want to thank Tom Hansen once more for appearing out of nowhere and being on the show.
No problem, pal. Glad I could help out.
Oh, hey, Blonde Guy Gamer, when did you get here?
What?
Hey, is Tom Hansen still there with you? Could you get him back on camera? I need to ask him about that exocell and whether or not he got it out of his body.
But I am Tom Hansen. I'm Tom, not Blonde Guy Gamer. I'm Tom, not Blondie. I'm Tom.
So is that a no?